The cost of living is crazy. You don't need me to tell you that. But it appears like lots of folks are getting by just putting everything on a credit card, which is plunging Americans deeper and deeper into debt. That is according to a brand new report that found household debt in the United States of America just hit a record high. I'm talking about mortgages and car loans and credit cards and student loans. But despite all the debt, there may be a little silver lining, which I'm going to tell you all about in this video. But before I do that, I want to thank my paid Facts HQ subscribers for voting for this story as the bonus this week. If you want to vote on next week's bonus story, you can do that by just following these easy steps and becoming a paid subscriber too. It is because of my paid subscribers that I'm able to bring you the news every single day. This channel would go away without them. So if you would like to support my work, please consider becoming a paid subscriber. Okay, I'm going to switch things up. Before I talk about the bad news, which is all of the debt that we're all drowning in, I want to start this video with that little silver lining that I mentioned. So the New York Fed puts out this American household debt and credit report every single quarter, and they just released all of the data for the third quarter of 2025. So that means July, August, and September. According to the New York Fed, the silver lining is household balance sheets, which is what the Fed calls the financial health of a household. They say those balance sheets look pretty good, pretty strong, meaning overall, when you take everything into consideration, when you combine household assets and liabilities, generally, Americans are doing pretty good. Of course, that does not mean everybody, and it certainly does not mean that people are thriving. All they said was U.S. households are doing pretty good. Now, this third quarter report also found that delinquencies are now starting to stabilize, meaning the rate of people who are delinquent on paying their loans, the chart isn't going like this, skyrocketing. The chart is sort of starting to level out. Now, that's not to say that people aren't delinquent. They are, and I'm about to show you how bad. It just means that delinquency rates are not as jarring as they were a few years ago. Now, I know that's not much of a silver lining, but I just report the facts, and sorry, that's what I got. Okay, so now let's talk about this debt, because the fact is, based on the third quarter numbers, households in the United States, when you combine mortgages, car loans, credit cards, and student loans, are sitting at a total of $18.6 trillion in debt. That is a new record high. Every single debt category has increased by double digits when compared to last year. And you can really see it when you compare the third quarter of 2025 to the third quarter of 2024. So just within a year. Mortgage debt is up almost $480 billion. Credit card debt increased almost $70 billion. Car loan debt increased by $11 billion. But we need to talk about student loan debt, because that debt increased $47 billion year over year. But it's not just about the increase in overall student debt, it's about the percentage of serious delinquencies that is alarming. The New York Fed considers a loan seriously delinquent when you have not made a payment in at least 90 days. So the number of people who are now seriously delinquent on their student loans is more than 14% higher in the third quarter of 2025 than it was in the third quarter of 2024. That was by far the biggest delinquency increase of any type of loan that the New York Fed looks at. Now, a 14% increase doesn't sound like a lot, but when you look at the chart, you can really see it. Do you see that red line that just goes straight up? That is the student loan serious delinquency line. And you can see it just goes straight up starting in the first quarter of 2025. Of course, the blue line is higher in delinquencies. That is the number of people who are seriously delinquent with their credit card debt. But nowhere else on the chart does the delinquency line go straight up. So the question is, what is going on with student loans? Well, in January of 2025, that is the first quarter. That is when President Trump took office. And almost immediately, his Department of Education began the process of ending the student loan forbearance program, which then meant that people were getting sent to collections for not paying their student loans. And what this chart is representing is what we anecdotally already know, which is when people are struggling to pay their basic bills and they don't have the money to keep up, they are just going to choose not to pay their student loans. And that line proves it. I also want to point out one other place where we're starting to see a dramatic spike. Do you see that blue line that is going straight up starting in the first quarter of 2025? And then to a lesser extent, that red line that is also starting to go straight up. These are serious delinquencies by age of all types of debt. The blue line represents 18 to 29-year-olds, and the red line represents 30 to 39-year-olds. Those two lines, according to the New York Fed's data, say that younger people in this country are dramatically becoming delinquent on their debt. And that, the New York Fed says, is concerning, not just for these young people, but overall for the US economy. And you can really see it when you start to break down each of the types of debt. You can see the same trend when it comes to delinquent credit card payments. You can see the blue line and the red line are clearly leading the pack. And you can see the same thing when it comes to delinquent auto loans. Again, the red and the blue lines, those younger Americans are the ones at the top with the most delinquencies. Now, while the auto loan delinquencies and the credit card delinquencies and the student loan delinquencies really look dramatic on the chart, I want to just, for the record, make it very clear that these are not the biggest sources of debt in the United States. The vast, vast, vast majority of debt in this country is represented here in orange. That is mortgage debt. It accounts for 70% of all the debt in this country. And according to the latest report for the third quarter, Americans are sitting on more than $13 trillion in mortgage debt. So if you want to read this report for yourself or look at any of those charts a little deeper, I'm going to email all of it out to you in my next Facts HQ email. So make sure you sign yourself up.